My daughter refused to sleep in her new room until I found what was hidden inside the wall. The first night after we moved into our dream house, my 7-year-old daughter refused to sleep in her new bedroom. She stood in the hallway, clutching her teddy bear so tightly her knuckles turned white. "I don't like that room," she whispered. I smiled. "It's just a new house, sweetheart. You'll get used to it." She slowly shook her head. "No." Then she looked directly at the bedroom wall. "The little girl cries in there every night." I felt a chill. My wife laughed it off. "She's just imagining things." So I tucked my daughter into bed, turned on the nightlight, and closed the door. 10 minutes later, I heard screaming. We rushed upstairs. She was standing on her bed, pointing at the wall with tears streaming down her face. "Daddy, she's knocking again." I pressed my ear against the wall. At first, nothing. Then, knock, knock, knock. 3 slow knocks from inside the wall. The next morning, I grabbed a hammer. I had no idea that breaking through that wall would uncover a secret that had been hidden for more than 30 years and change our family forever. The hammer felt unusually heavy in my hands. My daughter, Lily, stood behind me, refusing to take her eyes off the wall. "Daddy," she whispered, "please don't make her angry." I forced a smile. "There's no one in there." I swung the hammer. Crack! The drywall broke apart, sending dust into the air. Behind it wasn't insulation. There was a small wooden door. No handle, no hinges, just an old brass keyhole. My wife gasped. Who would build that inside a wall? As I brushed away more dust, I noticed something carved into the wood. 3 words, "Don't open it." We stared at each other. Every instinct told me to stop. Instead, I searched the house for a key. After an hour, I found one taped beneath the attic stairs. It was old, blackened with age, and fit perfectly into the tiny lock. The door creaked open. Inside was a narrow, hidden space. A child's blanket, a broken music box, a faded teddy bear, and a small metal lunchbox. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside were dozens of crayon drawings. Every drawing showed the same bedroom, the same house, the same family, except the little girl in every picture had been drawn behind the wall. My wife covered her mouth. Then Lily quietly said, "That's her." I looked at her. "What do you mean?" "The little girl who cries." I swallowed hard. "What's her name?" Lily answered without hesitation. She told me her name is Emily. Just then, the old music box inside the hidden space began to play by itself. Neither of us had touched it. As the haunting melody echoed through the room, a folded letter slipped from beneath the blanket. Across the front, written in faded ink, were 6 chilling words. "If you found this, she's awake again." The music box played only a few notes before falling silent. None of us moved. I unfolded the letter with trembling hands. It was dated April 12, 1995. "If anyone finds this, my name is Sarah. My husband thinks I'm imagining things, but our daughter Emily keeps talking to someone inside the walls. Every night she says the same thing." The letter stopped abruptly. On the back, written in shaky handwriting, were the words, "She says they want another child." A cold silence filled the room. My wife looked at Lily. "When did you first hear the crying?" "The first night," Lily whispered. She said she'd been waiting a long time. I felt my pulse racing. There had to be a logical explanation. I climbed into the hidden space with a flashlight. It was barely large enough for one person. At the far end, I noticed another loose wooden panel. When I pulled it away, I found a rusted tin box. Inside were old newspaper clippings. The first headline read, "Local family vanishes without a trace." The address beneath it made my stomach drop. It was our house. The article explained that 31 years earlier, a couple and their 8-year-old daughter, Emily, had disappeared overnight. No bodies were ever found. The case was never solved.
Just then Lily called from the bedroom.
"Daddy," her voice shook. "Someone is standing in the hallway." I rushed out. The hallway was empty, but at the far end where the moonlight reached the floor, there were small muddy footprints, not coming into the room, leading away from it, and they had appeared while all 3 of us were inside. I followed them down the hall. They stopped outside the basement door. The doorknob slowly turned by itself. Then, 3 slow knocks echoed from below. "Knock, knock, knock." Lily clutched my hand and whispered the words that made my blood run cold. She says, "We're not alone anymore." I reached for the basement doorknob. It was ice cold. For a moment, I considered calling the police.
But what would I tell them? My daughter hears a little girl in the walls. I took a deep breath and opened the door. The basement smelled of damp wood and old concrete. Our flashlight barely cut through the darkness. The muddy footprints continued down the stairs, then disappeared, as if whoever made them had simply vanished. Lily suddenly pointed toward the far corner. "Daddy, there's a light." I looked. A faint yellow glow leaked through a crack behind an old bookshelf. My wife and I pushed the heavy shelf aside. Hidden behind it was another door. Unlike the one inside the wall, this one had no lock, only a sentence carved into the wood. The truth was buried here. My heart pounded as I pulled it open. Behind the door was a tiny room no bigger than a closet. There was an old rocking chair, a broken lantern, and a dusty tape recorder. Beside it lay a cassette labeled, "For Whoever Lives Here Next." I inserted fresh batteries from my toolbox. The recorder crackled to life. A frightened woman's voice filled the room.
"If you're hearing this, leave this house." She paused, struggling to breathe. My daughter Emily wasn't hearing ghosts. She discovered something hidden beneath the basement. We tried to tell the police, but they didn't believe us. They said there was no evidence. Then the recording stopped. A loud thud echoed beneath our feet. The concrete floor shook. Another thud, then another. It wasn't coming from the walls. It was coming from under the basement floor. Lily stepped closer to me. Her face had gone completely pale. She whispered, "Emily says, they're still down there." At that exact moment, a small handprint slowly appeared in the dust on the concrete. None of us had touched it.
And beneath the handprint, someone had traced 3 chilling words.
"Dig here." None of us spoke. I stared at the words in the dust. "Dig here." Every instinct told me to leave. Instead, I grabbed an old shovel from the garage. The first few inches were just concrete. Then, clang, the shovel struck metal. We cleared away the rubble until a rusted iron hatch appeared beneath the basement floor. It had no handle, only a faded brass plaque. It read, "Property of Blackwood Children's Home." My wife frowned. I've never heard of that place. Neither had I. With all my strength, I pried the hatch open. A wave of cold air rushed out. A narrow staircase disappeared into darkness. The air smelled stale, as though no one had opened it in decades. Lily suddenly grabbed my arm. She says we have to hurry. Who? Emily. She's scared. I switched on my flashlight and we slowly descended the steps. At the bottom was a long underground hallway lined with small wooden doors. Each door had a child's name carved into it. Anna, Jacob, Michael, then Emily. My hands trembled as I pushed open Emily's door. Inside was a tiny room with a single bed, a worn teddy bear, and dozens of drawings taped to the walls. One drawing stopped me cold. It showed our house, but beneath the house was a secret tunnel. In the tunnel stood several shadowy figures, watching, waiting. On the back of the drawing, written in a child's handwriting, were the words, "They told me no one would ever find us." Before I could say a word, a loud metallic slam echoed through the tunnel. The iron hatch above us had just closed. We ran back toward the stairs. I pushed with all my strength. It wouldn't move. We were trapped underground. Then from somewhere deep in the darkness, we heard children's voices. Soft at first, then louder, all chanting the same sentence. "You came too late. You came too late. You came too late." Lily looked into the darkness, tears filling her eyes. "They're not talking to us," she whispered. "They're talking to someone behind us." I slowly turned around. A figure was standing at the end of the hallway. Not moving, just watching. And in its hand, it held the same teddy bear Lily slept with every night. I spun around. The figure stood motionless at the end of the hallway, barely visible in the beam of my flashlight. It looked like a little girl, long dark hair, a faded white dress, in one hand. She held Lily's teddy bear. "Lily," I whispered, "stay behind me." But instead of hiding, Lily stepped forward. Tears filled her eyes. "She isn't trying to hurt us. She's lonely." The little girl slowly placed the teddy bear on the floor. Then she pointed to the last door in the hallway. Unlike the others, it had no name, only a rusty lock. Above it, someone had carved 3 words. "Do not open." My wife grabbed my arm. "We're leaving." "I can't," I replied. "Not until we know the truth." I found an old iron bar lying nearby and forced the lock open. The door creaked inward. Inside was a small office. Dust covered everything. A desk, a filing cabinet, stacks of yellowed papers. On the wall hung dozens of photographs of children.
Each one had a name. Each one had a red stamp across it. Missing. My hands shook as I opened the top drawer. Inside was a leather journal belonging to the director of Blackwood Children's Home. The first page read, "If this diary is ever found, the world will finally know what happened beneath this house." As I turned the pages, the horrifying truth unfolded. Blackwood wasn't an orphanage. It was a secret shelter where children were hidden from a dangerous criminal group that kidnapped vulnerable families. One night, the kidnappers discovered the tunnels. The staff evacuated as many children as they could. But some never made it out. Emily was one of the children left behind, not because anyone abandoned her, but because the adults believed she had escaped through another exit. For years, everyone thought she was dead. She wasn't. She had survived underground for days before. Rescuers unknowingly sealed the final entrance during repairs to the house. I could barely breathe. Then I noticed the final page of the journal. It had been written much later in different handwriting. Just one sentence. "If you found this, thank you for coming back for us." At that moment, the hallway echoed with the sound of children's laughter. Not frightened laughter, happy laughter. The little girl smiled for the first time. She looked at Lily, then slowly faded into the light. The cold air lifted. The tunnel became silent. When we finally reached the surface, the basement door sealed moments before opened effortlessly. Weeks later, police excavated the underground rooms. They uncovered records that solved decades-old missing person cases and brought long-awaited answers to many families. We moved out of the house soon after, but on our last morning, Lily looked back at her bedroom window and smiled. "What is it?" I asked. She squeezed my hand. "They're not crying anymore, Daddy. They're finally home." The end.